Welcome. Today I'm going to be reading from Donna Haraway, A Cyborg Manifesto, Science, Technology, and Socialist-feminism in the 20th Century. We start with the first essay, Ironic Dream, on which women into circuit. This essay is an attempt to build a remarkable feminism, socialism, and materialism. That do not and holding irony is also when I was on with
cyborg on the construction of the conscious imagination of possibility. The cyborg is a matter of experience experience in the late 20th century. This is the struggle for life. The boundary between life and social reality.
And with a power that is not generated in the history of sexuality. Cyborg sex restores some of the lovely, replicative, Baroque, fern invertebrates, such as prophylactics against heterosexism. Cyborg replication is uncoupled from organic reproduction. Modern production seems like a dream of cyborg colonization work, a dream that makes the nightmare of Taylorism seem idyllic. And modern war is a cyborg orgy, coded by C3I, Command Control Communication Intelligence, an $84 billion item in 1984's U.S. defense budget. I'm making an argument for the cyborg as a fiction mapping our social and bodily reality, and as an imaginative resource suggesting some very fruitful couplings. Michael Foucault's biopolitics is a flaccid premonition of cyborg politics, a very open field. By the late 20th century, our time, a mythic time, we are all chimeras, theorized and fabricated hybrids of machine and organism. In short, we are cyborgs. This cyborg is our ontology. It gives us our politics. The cyborg is a condensed image of both imagination and material reality, the two joined centers structuring any possibility of historical transformation. In the traditions of Western science and politics, the tradition of racist male-dominant capitalism, the tradition of progress, the tradition of appropriation of nature as resource for the productions of culture, the tradition of reproductions of the self from the reflections of the other. The relation between organism and machine has been a border war. The stakes of the border war have been territories of production, reproduction, and imagination. This chapter is an argument for pleasure in the confusion of boundaries and for responsibility in their construction. It is also an effort to contribute to socialist feminist culture and theory in a postmodernist, non-naturalist mode, and in the utopian tradition of imagining a world without gender, which is perhaps a world without genesis, but maybe also a world without end. The cyborg incarnation is outside salvation history, nor does it mark time in an Oedipal calendar attempting to heal the terrible cleavages of gender in an oral symbiotic utopia or post-Oedipal apocalypse. As Zoe Sophoulis argues in her unpublished manuscript on Jacques Lacan, Melanie Klein, and nuclear culture, Lackline, the most terrible and perhaps the most promising monsters in cyborg worlds, are embodied in non-Oedipal narratives with different logic of repression, which we need to understand for our survival. The cyborg is a creature in a post-gender world. It has no truck with bisexuality, pre-Oedipal symbiosis, unalienated labor, or other seductions of organic wholeness through a final appropriation of all the powers of the parts into a higher sense of unity. In a sense, the cyborg has no origin story in the Western sense. A final irony, since the cyborg is also the awful apocalyptic telos of the West's escalating dominations of abstract individuation, an ultimate self, untied at last from all dependency, a man in space. An origin story to the Western, humanist sense depends on the myth of original unity, fullness, bliss, and terror, represented by the phallic mother from whom all humans must separate. The task of individual development and of history, the twin potent myths inscribed most powerfully for us in psychoanalysis and Marxism. Hilary Klein has argued that both Marxism and psychoanalysis, in their concepts of labor and of individuation and gender formation, depend on the plot of original unity, of which difference must be produced and enlisted in a drama of escalating domination of women and culture. Women/nature. The cyborg skips the step of original unity, of identification with nature in the Western sense. This is its legitimate promise that might lead to subversion of its teleology of Star Wars. I'm going to read that sentence again. This is its illegitimate promise that might lead to subversion of its teleology as Star Wars.
The cyborg is resolutely committed to partiality, irony, intimacy, and perversity. It is oppositional, utopian, and completely without innocence. No longer structured by the polarity of public and private, the cyborg defines a technological poles based partly on a revolution of social relations in the oikos, the household. Nature and culture are reworked. The one can no longer be the resource for appropriation or incorporation by the other. The relationships for forming wholes from parts, including those of polarity and hierarchical domination, are at issue in the cyborg world. Unlike the hopes of Frankenstein's monster, the cyborg does not expect its father to save it through a restoration of the garden. That is, through the fabrication of a heterosexual mate, through its completion in a finished whole, a city and cosmos. The cyborg does not dream of community on the model of the organic family, this time without the Oedipal project. The cyborg would not recognize the Garden of Eden. It is not made of mud and cannot dream of returning to dust. Perhaps that is why I want to see if cyborgs can subvert the apocalypse of returning to nuclear dust in the manic compulsion to name the enemy. Cyborgs are not reverent. They do not remember the cosmos.
They are wary of holism but needy for connection. They seem to have a natural feel for united front politics but without vanguard party. The main trouble with cyborgs, of course, is that they are the illegitimate offspring of militarism and patriarchal capitalism, not to mention state socialism. But illegitimate offspring are often exceedingly unfaithful to their origins. Their fathers, after all, are inessential. Their fathers, after all, are inessential. I will return to the science fiction of cyborgs at the end of the chapter, but now I want to signal three crucial boundary breakdowns that make the following political, fictional, political scientific analysis possible. By the late 20th century in United States scientific culture, the boundary between human and animal is thoroughly breached. The last beachheads of uniqueness have been polluted, if not turned into amusement parks. Language, tool use, social behavior, mental events, nothing really convincingly settles the separation of human and animal. Many people no longer feel the need for such separation. Indeed, many branches of feminist culture affirm the pleasure of connection of human and other living creatures. Movements for animal rights are not irrational denials of human uniqueness. They are clear-sighted recognition of connection across the discredited breach of nature and culture. Biology and evolutionary theory over the last 2 centuries have simultaneously produced modern organisms as objects of knowledge and reduced the line between humans and animals to a faint trace re-etched in ideological struggle or professional disputes between life and social science. Within this framework, teaching modern Christian creationism should be fought as a form of animal abuse. Biological determinism ideology is only one position opened up in scientific culture for arguing the meanings of human animality. There is much room for radical political people to contest the meanings of the breached boundary. The cyborg appears in myth precisely where the boundary between human and animal is transgressed. Far from signaling a walling off of people from other living beings, cyborgs signal disturbingly and pleasurably tight couplings. Bestiality has a new status in this cycle of marriage exchange. The second leaky distinction is between animal, human, organism, and machine. I will allow for the other speech producer to go on. I'm getting tired of reading.
The second leaky distinction is between animal, human, organism, and machine. Pre-cybernetic machines could be haunted. There was always the specter of the ghost in the machine. This dualism structured the dialogue between materialism and idealism that was settled by a dialectical progeny, called spirit or history, according to taste. But basically machines were not self-moving, self-designing, autonomous. They could not achieve man's dream, only mock it. They were not man, an author to himself, but only a caricature of that masculinist reproductive dream. To think they were otherwise was paranoid. Now we are not so sure. Late 20th century machines have made thoroughly ambiguous the difference between natural and artificial, mind and body, self-developing and externally designed, and many other distinctions that used to apply to organisms and machines. Our machines are disturbingly lively, and we ourselves frighteningly inert.
Technological determinism is only one ideological space opened up by the reconceptions of machine and organism as coded texts through which we engage in the play of writing and reading the world. Textualization of everything in post-structuralist, postmodern theory has been damned by Marxists and social feminists for its utopian disregard for the lived relations of domination that ground the play of arbitrary reading. It is certainly true that postmodernist strategies like my cyborg myth subvert myriad organic wholes, for example, the poem, the primitive creature, the biological organism. In short, the certainty of what counts as nature, a source of insight and promise of innocence, is undermined, probably fatally. The transcendent authorization of interpretation is lost, and with it the ontology grounding Western epistemology. But the alternative is not cynicism or faithlessness, that is some version of abstract existence, like the account of technological determinism destroying man by the machine or meaningful political action by the text. Who cyborgs will be is a radical question. The answers are a matter of survival. Both chimpanzees and artifacts have politics, so why shouldn't we? The third distinction is a subset of the second. The boundary between physical and non-physical is very imprecise for us. Pop physics books on the consequences of quantum theory and the indeterminacy principle are kind of popular scientific equivalents of Harlequin romances as a marker of radical change in American white heterosexuality, they get it wrong, but they are on the right subject. Modern machines are quintessentially microelectronic devices. They are everywhere and they are invisible. Modern machinery is an irreverent upstart god, mocking the Father's ubiquity and spirituality. The silicon chip is a surface for writing. It is etched in molecular scales disturbed only by atomic noise, the ultimate interference for nuclear scores. Writing, power, and technology are old partners in Western stories of the origin of civilization, but the miniaturization has changed our experience of mechanism. Miniaturization has turned out to be about power. Small is not so much beautiful as preeminently dangerous, as in cruise missiles. Contrast the TV sets of the 1950s or the news cameras of the 1970s with the TV wristbands or hand-sized video cameras now advertised. Our best machines are made of sunshine. They are all light and clean. They are nothing but signals, electromagnetic waves, a section of spectrum. These machines are imminently portable, mobile, a matter of immense human pain in Detroit and Singapore. People are nowhere near so fluid, being both material and opaque. Cyborgs are ether. Quintessence. Ether quintessence. The ubiquity and invisibility of cyborgs is precisely why sunshine belt machines are so deadly. They are hard to see politically as materially. They are about consciousness or its simulation. There are floating signifiers moving in pickup trucks across Europe, blocked more effectively by the witch weavings of the displaced and so unnatural Greenham women who read the cyborg webs of power so very well than by the militant labor of older masculinist politics whose natural constituency needs defense jobs. Ultimately, the hardest science is about the realm of the greatest boundary confusion, the realm of pure number, pure spirit, C3I, cryptography, and the preservation of potent secrets. The new machines are so clean and light. Their engineers are sun worshippers, mediating a new scientific revolution associated with the night dream of the post-industrial society. The diseases evoked by these clean machines are no more than the minuscule coding changes of an antigen in the immune system, no more than the experience of stress. The nimble fingers of Oriental women, the old fascination of little Anglo-Saxon Victorian girls in doll houses, women's enforced attention to the small take on quite new dimensions in this world. There might be a cyborg Alice taking account of these new dimensions. Ironically, it might be the unnatural cyborg women making chips in Asia and spiral dancing in Santa Rita jail whose constructed unities will guide effective oppositional strategies.
So my cyborg myth is about transgressed boundaries, potent fusions, and dangerous possibilities which progressive people might explore as one part of needed political work. One of my premises is that most American socialists and feminists see deepened dualisms of mind and body, animal and machine, idealism and materialism in the social practices, symbolic formulations, and physical artifacts associated with high technology and scientific culture. From One-Dimensional Man, Marcuse, 1964, to The Death of Nature, Merchant, 1980, the analytic resources developed by progressives have insisted on the necessary domination of techniques and recalled us to an imagined organic body to integrate our resistance. Another of my premises is that the need for unity of people trying to resist worldwide intensification of domination has never been more acute. But a slightly perverse shift of perspective might better enable us to contest for meanings, as well as for other forms of power and pleasure in technologically mediated societies.
From one perspective, a cyborg world is about the final imposition of a grid of control on the planet, about the final abstraction embodied in a Star Wars apocalypse waged in the name of defense, about the final appropriation of women's bodies in a masculinist orgy of war. Sophia, 1984. From another perspective, a cyborg world might be about lived social and bodily realities in which people are not afraid of their joint kinship with animals and machines, not afraid to be permanently partial identities and contradictory standpoints. The political struggle is to see from both perspectives at once, because each reveals both dominations and possibilities unimaginable from the other vantage point. Single vision produces worse illusions than double vision or many-headed monsters. Cyborg unities are monstrous and illegitimate. In our present political circumstances, we could hardly hope for more potent myths for resistance and recoupling. I like to imagine LAG, the Livermore Action Group, as a kind of cyborg society dedicated to realistically converting the laboratories that most fiercely embody and spew out the tools of technological apocalypse, and committed to building a political form that actually manages to hold together witches, engineers, elders, perverts, Christians, mothers, and Leninists long enough to disarm the state. Fission Impossible is the name of the affinity group in my town. Affinity, related not by blood, but by choice, the appeal of one chemical nuclear group for another, avidly. So this was chapter 1, an ironic dream of a common language for women in the integrated circuit, from a cyborg manifesto by Donna Haraway. Thanks for tuning in, and goodbye.